Okay. Anyway, the time before last, I like taking the books, the 12 books of the minor prophets. And so last week, I spoke on Obadiah. The time before that, I spoke on Malachi. So this time, we're going to speak on Habakkuk.
How do you say that?
Habakkuk. I looked it up, and there was like 3 different pronunciations, and I've always pronounced it Habakkuk, and there's different pronunciations of the cook part.
Okay.
You know, it's crook, all that. Then I go, but anyway, I just say Habakkuk. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'm only going to do chapter 2. Now, chapter 2 has the greatest verse in the Bible that has had the most impact on the church and the world, the whole world. And it's contained in this chapter. Now, a little bit about Habakkuk. He was a member of the tribe of Levi, and they deduced this because of the song that he does at the end. And he was active around 612 BC, and that's the same time Jeremiah and Nehemiah were preaching. There were other people around that time too, like Daniel and Ezekiel and all that, but they weren't writing their books then. They did it after they got captive. But Jeremiah and Zephaniah were preaching against Judah, because Judah was just, it was being bad, and they were corrupt, and well, we'll get into some of this stuff, but Habakkuk was saying, well, look at Judah. You know, he's complaining to God. He's saying, look at Judah. They're so bad. He says, Lord, why do you tolerate this evil? Well, you know, why don't you act? And then God responded in the first chapter. He said, I'm doing a work in your day which you would not believe, though it were told to you. For indeed I am raising up the Chaldeans, the bitter and hasty nation. And then all of a sudden he goes, well, wait a minute. They're even worse than we are. You know, what are you picking them to chastise us, you know? And so chapter 2 is God's going to answer him, and then he's going to give the woes about Babylon, because Babylon's going to be punished. His name means embrace, because he embraced the word. And his tomb is in northern Israel, and he lived in Jerusalem with Jeremiah, Zephaniah. And so let's get on to this, and then we'll get into that verse that is to change the world. Okay, Habakkuk, verse 1. There, okay. I will stand my watch and set myself on the rampart and watch to see what he will say to me and what I will answer when I am corrected. Okay, he isn't complaining anymore. He complained to God already. He said, "Why are you using the Chaldeans actually they're Babylonians, but they call them the Chaldeans." And so he's up on a watchtower, which is a rampart, a military thing. He's up there, and he's waiting to hear what God's going to tell him, and God's answer. And then he says, "And then I will answer when I'm corrected." So he knows God's going to correct him, because God is sending the Babylonians to punish Israel, and God has told him that already, and now God's saying, well, I'm sending them. So he says, well, I'll listen to what you have to say to me, you know, and then I'll stand corrected. Verse 2, then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it. So God's answering, and the first instruction is it isn't a private revelation to Habakkuk. It's for everybody. So that's why he says, write it on tablets, because I want you to show it to everybody. This is from the Lord. And then when it says that he may run who reads it, implies urgency, because he's gonna say these things, and he wants the people to respond. It's a call to action. And so this is a principle in teaching, in ministry, that you want to make the truth clear, and you want it for everybody. It's not for a private interpretation. I feel like Netanyahu, when he speaks, he has these cards in front of him, and he only has like 2 sentences in front of him, and then he flips the card, and then he goes to another one, and then he flips the card. And I have each verse on a separate piece of paper. I should have just put them all on one, but I put them on separate. So every time I go to a verse, I'm flipping things around. Okay, so the next verse, verse 3. For the vision is yet for an appropriate time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. So that sounds like sort of a contradiction. It says it will tarry and it will not tarry. But so anyway, this isn't a vague thing that's going to happen in the future. It's on a specific time. It's going to happen on God's timing. And it will come to pass. Now, what he's talking about is though it will tarry and it will not tarry, seems a contradiction, but it's not. The perspective is God's looking. God, in Habakkuk's mind, it's going to take a long time. In God's mind, it's not going to tarry. He's going to do it. And so it's from 2 different perspectives. And so it says, because we have a limited viewpoint, and God has a big viewpoint. He's outside of time. So to him, things are like that. And to us, they're going, man, forever. It's going to take forever, you know. Now we come to the good verse. Okay, verse 4. Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. This is the most famous verse in Habakkuk. It's quoted 3 times in the New Testament. In Romans 1:17, in Galatians 3:11, and in Hebrews 10:38. It's the foundational truth of the Christian faith. Okay, so let's jump forward from Habakkuk is back in 612 BC. And so let's jump ahead 2,000 years later in the 16th century. Europe is dominated by the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. They are preaching salvation is a process of sacraments, of good works, of penance, of indulgences, and all that, and meditation of the priesthood. So, and then the average person doesn't even have access to the Bible. They have to go to a priest to just even learn about the Bible. This young monk named Martin Luther, okay, he was a brilliant scholar, but he was tormented by his sinfulness. He knew that he was sinful, and he tried everything. He tried fasting. He tried long hours in prayer on his knees. He tried confession. He tried self-flagellation. I guess that's whipping yourself and stuff. And he tried pilgrimages. He even went to Rome, and there's these stairs that he climbed up on his knees, kissing each step as he climbed up as a penance for God, because he felt that he was unworthy, that nothing he could do. He saw the righteousness of God. He says, I could never be that way, and I'm just so unworthy and so sinful. There's nothing I could do. So he was wrestling with this, and he was reading the book of Romans. And in Romans chapter 1, verse 17, it says, for in the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith. It is written, but the just shall live by faith. all of a sudden a light went on in his head. Not a literal light, because they didn't have lights back then. It's just an expression. He all of a sudden had a revelation from God that the righteousness of God was not something God demanded from him, but something God imparted to him. It was not a righteousness earned by works, but a righteousness that was given as a free gift in faith in Jesus Christ. So it wasn't something he worked for, and it was just a revelation to him. It's like God's doing the work, and I'm just receiving it. He later wrote, "Here I felt I was altogether born again and had entered paradise itself through open gates." And then that was the spark that started the Reformation. It ignited the Protestant Reformation. The core doctrine that emerged was sola fide, faith alone. Faith alone saves. Faith, not plus works, not plus sacraments, not plus penance, not just faith. Simple, childlike trust in Jesus Christ was already accomplished on the cross. It undermined the entire system of earning salvation. If salvation is by faith alone, then indulgences are meaningless. The elaborate system of merit is obsolete. It empowered the individual believer. You didn't have to go to the priest anymore. You could go straight to God. You didn't have anybody to mediate for you. This led to the translation of the Bible in common language so people could read it and understand it themselves. It unleashed a torrent of change. Reformation wasn't just theological. It was a social earthquake. It led to new forms of church governance, the rise of nation states, the emphasis on individual consciousness, the ultimately foundation of modern democracy and education. It literally changed the whole world. All of this from a seemingly obscure prophet in the Old Testament, Habakkuk, crying out to God in his distress, and God's simple, profound answer, the just will live by faith. Now, to me, that was the greatest verse in the Bible that changed the world. Now, there's the greatest gospel verse in the Bible. Now, a lot of people are going to say the greatest Bible verse for salvation is something you guys memorized when you were first saved, John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. But I was listening to, for this study, I listened to Chuck Missler and John MacArthur and other things. And John MacArthur said that's not the greatest gospel verse in the Bible. He says the greatest gospel verse in the Bible is 2 Corinthians 5:21. So let's look that up. It's interesting. I know we don't have a slide for it, but I know I have it ready someplace.
2 Corinthians what?
2 Corinthians 5:21. Okay. And it says, For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. So God made Jesus, who was sinless, that was perfect, the perfect lamb, to be sin for us. Now, he treated him like he was sin. But, I mean, he never sinned, so Jesus was sinless. He was the spotless lamb. But he treated him like he sinned. It was as if he lived my life, my sinful life. And then he turns around, God turns around and looks at me and says, I lived Jesus' life, Jesus' sinless life. And so that's what this verse is saying. It's called substitution. When he looks at the cross, he sees me. When he looks at me, he sees Christ. And so that's what the way God sees us. When he's looking at the cross and he sees all the sin, he sees everything that the people have committed, all that stuff, all the rotten stuff. But when he looks on the person that has been saved, he sees Jesus. And his righteousness has been switched. And so it's called substitution. And so that's what John MacArthur was saying, that that's it's the pure gospel. It's that all of our sins are put on Christ, and all Christ's righteousness is put on us. And so that's why we're justified to the Lord. Anyway, that's a side note. That's nothing to do with Habakkuk, but I just found that interesting when I was doing my studying. Now, this next thing is, okay, so Judah and Jerusalem were just in idolatry and sinful and all that. And so, Habakkuk and Jeremiah and Nehemiah were all preaching to the people saying, you guys are rotten, you better turn around, you better repent, you better do this stuff. And so God told Habakkuk that he's going to take care of it, but he's going to send the Babylonians. So he was all upset, and he's going, wait a minute, they're worse than we are, so what do that's not fair, like that you're using them. Well, then God answers that in this chapter. And he talks about Babylon, that Babylon's going to get their due. So in verse 5, it says, indeed, because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, and he does not stay at home, because he enlarges his desire as hell. And he is like death, and cannot be satisfied. He gathers to himself all nations, and heaps up for himself all people. Now, they're talking about Babylon. Babylon is characterized by arrogance, an insatiable greed, and restlessness, and a conquering spirit. They are never satisfied. They're always grasping for more, like death itself. And this is the nature of unchecked human ambition and power. If you notice that people that have money, lots of money, not like us. But people that have lots of money, they want more money. They have enough money. They can live comfortable the rest of their lives and their whole families and everything else, but they want more money. And they strive for more money, and then they wind up dying, leaving all the money to their relatives. But this is the way it was with Babylon. At Babylon, they had this unchecked ambition. They wanted to, they had this arrogance and this greed. Verse 6, will not all these take up a proverb against him, and a taunting riddle against him, and say, woe to him who increased what is not his, how long? And to him who loads himself with many pledges. Babylon plundered many nations. They were attacking all kinds of, they just took whatever that wasn't theirs. And God says that those very nations will turn around and mock them. The pledges refer to goods taken as security for loans, which Babylon never intended to repay in the first place. So they just kept taking from people. And they would make false promises. Verse 7, will not your creditors rise up suddenly? Will they not awaken who oppress you? And you will become their booty? I don't like that word, but anyway. The tables will turn. And those Babylon oppressed will rise up and plunder Babylon in return. And this is a principle of divine retribution. And in verse 8, because you have plundered many nations, all the remnant of those people shall plunder you, because of men's blood and the violence of the land and the city and all who dwell in it. The punishment fits the crime. What Babylon did to others will be done to them. This was fulfilled in the Medes and the Persians when they conquered Babylon. But that's a whole different story. That's concerns Daniel and and King Cyrus of Persia and all that stuff. And that's a real interesting story how that came about, where Daniel even told the King Cyrus of Persia, see, it's written like 100 years before you came here, your name's in there, saying that you're going to conquer. And then King Cyrus was so overwhelmed by that he said, okay, you Jews could go back home and I'll pay for it, and but anyway, but there's a whole story on that, and it's just interesting. And if Daniel was a minor prophet, I'd get into that, but he's not. So the next time I'm allowed to speak, I'll have another minor prophet for you guys. Okay. Anyway, verse 9. Woe to him who covets evil gain for his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of disaster. This is a woe against those who build their empires through dishonest and exploitive means, thinking that they can secure themselves from judgment if they build their nest on high. It's a metaphor of seeking security with their own power and wealth. Babylon thought that they could secure themselves by, they had high walls, they had a moat or even a river going in all around it, and they had another wall on the other side that nobody could penetrate. And so they were secure. They said, well, we're secure, nothing's going to hurt us. And then in Daniel, it talks about that the King Cyrus blocked up the river farther up, and then they just the Persians and the Medes just came straight across on dry land. And so all that preparation was for naught. That's another interesting story in Daniel. Daniel has a lot of stories. Daniel's a good book, man. I mean, it has so many things in it. About the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the fiery furnace, and Daniel in the lion's den, and I mean, there's. I just said one thing. The one story I like.
But we're not talking about Daniel.
We're not talking about Daniel, but the one story I like about Daniel is when Daniel's praying, and it shows the spirit world where he's praying, and the angel comes and says, I was held up by this evil angels, and they were stopping me, and I thought that was good. That sort of revealed what spirit, a little bit of a peek into the spirit world, that there is a spiritual battle going on, and we don't even know nothing about it. But I'm not going to talk about Daniel. Okay, so let's get on to verse 11. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the timbers will answer. Even inanimate objects, the material used to build their ill-gotten empire, will bear witness against them. And that was this about the walls and the rivers and all that stuff, where they thought they were protected by these walls and the rivers and all this natural stuff, and even that turned against them when the Medes blocked it up. When I first heard this, the stones will cry out, the first thing that came to my mind was when Jesus was coming into the Jerusalem, they were telling, just tell your people to stop cheering you and saying Hosanna and all that stuff. He said, if they don't do it, the rocks will cry out. Yeah. That's one thing I want to get when I go to Jerusalem. I want to get one of those rocks. Yeah. I want to get one of those rocks, and I'm going to bring it and mount it onto a thing. And so this is one of the stones that didn't cry out. My son, bless his heart, we were in Rome, the Colosseum. You're not supposed to touch all that stuff. You can walk through it and do all. He took a rock from the Colosseum. And I said, what did you do? I mean, we came back to the base. My son was in the Air Force, and he was stationed there for 2 years, and so we went to visit him. And then, he took us around different places. We went to all different places. But anyway, that's beside the point. So we get back to the base, and he has this little rock. I said, where'd you get that? He goes, from that Colosseum. I said, you shouldn't, what's wrong with you? And he says, well, it was just one little rock. I said, yeah, but you know how many visitors they have at the Colosseum? Millions of visitors. If everybody took one little rock, there wouldn't be a Colosseum to go visit. So Anyway, but I took the rock from him, and I tossed it, though. I didn't want it. I know. Well, I was going all the way back down to Rome. We were up in Laverna, which is way up north near Pisa. I wasn't going to drive all the way down. We were way up north near Florence, way up there, and I wasn't going to travel all the way down to Rome just to put a rock back, and I'd probably get caught by somebody, and then I'd be in jail. But anyway, so that's what happened. But he learned a lesson, so I guess that was worth it. Anyway, verse 12. Woe to him who builds a town with bloodshed, who establishes a city by iniquity. This is directed at the foundation of the Babylonian Empire. It was built on violence, conquest, and injustice. Verse 13, behold, it is not the Lord of hosts that the peoples labor to feed the fire, and the nations weary themselves in vain. This is the divine perspective. All this activity, the conquest, the building of empires through violence, is ultimately for nothing. It is like laboring in the fire, a futile, destructive effort. God is the Lord of hosts. Yahweh Sabiho. That's the way I think that's the way you pronounce it. I looked it up, and then this where it says, how do you pronounce this? And I listened to it about 3 times, and that's what I got from it. So that's as close as I could get to what it's supposed to be. But God, the Lord of hosts, is commander of the armies. He's sovereign over all. And so everybody's efforts are meaningless. God is in control. He's in control now. He's in control forever. And someday he's going to be in Jerusalem, sitting on the throne, and in control of the world. He's going to rule with a rod of iron. Okay, verse 14. Okay. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Okay, so this is a contrast to the Babylon. Now he's given some verses to help Habakkuk, build him up a little bit. So this is a contrast. While human empires are built on blood and come to nothing, God's ultimate purpose will prevail. The earth will be filled with his glory. This is a messianic prophecy pointing to the future kingdom, where Christ reigns and his knowledge covers the whole earth. And so this is the answer to Habakkuk, his initial complaint. God's justice and glory will ultimately triumph over all human wickedness. And this will happen during the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Jesus on the earth. And it's a time for the Jews, a promise to the Jews that for their kingdom. And so they will be reigning. The people will be coming to the Jews. And right now, everybody in the world hates the Jews. Everybody. I don't know. Well, not everybody. Okay, all nations hate the Jews. Whenever they vote in the United Nations, they all vote against them. They want to take Netanyahu to court. It's a spiritual battle. It's a spiritual thing because there's no nation on this earth that everybody in the world hates. And so, but Jesus will be reigning from Jerusalem, and the Jews will be going out, and people will be touching the hems of their garments, saying, "Please tell us more about God. Please tell us more about Jesus." And so they're going to have sacrifices in the third temple, and it's going to be a time where the Jews are looked up to instead of being looked down upon. And I don't know where we're going to be. We're going to be forever with Jesus Christ, but I don't know what we're going to be doing. I've been thinking about that, trying to think, well, what are we going to be doing? I mean, Jesus can be reigning from Jerusalem. We're supposed to be always with Jesus. So, but the Jews are actually going to, it's the time for the Jews. It's a fulfillment of their prophecies and fulfillment of God's promise to them. So, but I don't know what we're going to be doing. So,
Coming back with him.
what's that?
We're reigning with him.
Yeah, well, we're with them, so we're all standing around behind them. I mean, I don't know what jobs we're going to have. Now I know after that, then there's the big judgment, and then he creates a new world, a new heaven, a new earth, and everything. Then we will be getting jobs and doing things and your favorite things. Like my wife was saying that she wants to be in charge of all the puppies. So, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. So, okay, now verse 15. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbor, pressing him to your bottle, and even to make him drunk, that you may look upon his nakedness. Woe speaks of exploitation and degradation. Babylon's depicted. He's going back to Babylon now, by the way. he's depicting Babylon as forcing the nations into a state of weakness and vulnerability, and then gloating over their humiliation. So it's a picture of spiritual and moral depravity. Now he's still speaking against Babylon. He's saying, you are filled with shame instead of glory. You also drink and be exposed as uncircumcised. The cup of the Lord's right hand will be turned against you. The utter shame will be on your glory. Again, this is the principle of retribution. And the shame that they inflicted on others will be on them in proportion. The cup of the Lord's right hand is a powerful image of divine wrath and judgment. So these verses are letting Habakkuk know that Babylon's going to get their just desserts. So Babylon is going to conquer Judea temporarily, because who was the 70 years, said 70 years? Daniel? Yeah, he said 70 years. They're only going to be in captivity for 70 years. And that was payment. I was listening to Chuck Missler. He said, well, I don't talk about Daniel. Okay, I'm getting off track, but Daniel is good. But that was payment for all the festivals that they missed every 50 years, the year of Jubilee, that they missed all those years of Jubilee. Pardon me? Jeremiah? Okay. Okay, so I can talk. Jeremiah. Okay. For the violence done to Lebanon will cover you, and the plunder of verse 17, by the way. And the plunder of the beast which made them afraid, because of men's blood and the violence of the land and the city and all that dwell in it. Lebanon was known for their forest, especially the cedars. In David's time, that he was friends with the people in Lebanon, and they used to ship cedar down there so he could build buildings and temples and everything else. But Babylon exploited that, and they destroyed the cedars, and it was just a ecological disaster. They were like locusts. They just went in there and just took what they wanted and destroyed what they wanted. And so this talks about their cruelty to both humans and the natural world, and the violence will come back on them. Okay, verse 18. What profit is the image, and what its maker should carve it? The molded image, the teacher of lies, the maker of mold should trust in it, and to make mute idols. This targets Babylon's pride and depravity with their idolatry. Idolatry. Okay, their idol worship. It's like Porky Pig does that. He's talking, okay, or something. So anyway, okay. Anyway, this is the final woe on Babylon's pride and depravity. Okay, they trusted in these man-made gods. He calls them the teacher of lies, and their futility will be laid bare. Laid bare. I'm Italian. I can't help it. Okay. Anyway, was like was it Elijah when he was up there on the hill, and all the priests of all the Baal were up there on the hill, and he was making fun of them, saying, like, where's your God? Maybe they're sleeping, or maybe they're on vacation. Where are they? Like that. And so that's what God's doing here. He's telling me. He says, you make these things and they can't talk, they can't do anything. So it's just the futility of idolatry is laid bare. Verse 19 continues this thought. Woe to him who says to the wood, awake, to the silent stone, arise, it shall teach. Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, yet there is no breath in it. So this shows the absurdity of worshiping inanimate objects. These idols can't speak, they can't move, they can't teach, they can't give life. They're utterly powerless. And that sort of reminds me of the Philistines, when they took the Ark of the Covenant and they put it before Drago. I think it was Dragon. Dagon? Okay, Dagon. And they put it before him, and then Dagon would fall. And then they would come back and put it up, and then Dagon would fall again, So, but anyway, but they couldn't. People do that today. They worship the forest. They worship the creation, Mother Earth, and and all that. And they should worship the one that created it, the one that made it. Okay, now verse 20, it says, "But the Lord in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silence before him." Okay, this is the crescendo of the chapter. It contrasts these mute idols. While Babylon served dead gods, the true God, Yahweh, is alive, enthroned in his holy temple. This refers to his heavenly dwelling, his sovereign presence. And because he's a living God, the sovereign Lord, the creator of all, the proper response of all creation is silence. It's just reverence and awe. There's that song that says, I could imagine, and you go to heaven, will I say hallelujah, or will I go drop to my knees? And I always think, I'm going to drop to my knees, because seeing God, I know how bad I am. And so, and anyway, it was a good song, though. It does show you, things. So, Habakkuk chapter 2, it shows the importance of waiting on God. Like Habakkuk, we need to get into a posture of listening and waiting for God's word, especially when we don't understand what's going on. Because sometimes we get impatient and we're saying, well, come on, let's get the show on the road. It's like the rapture. I keep saying, let's go, let's get on with your program. Let's get all the Christians out of here, and let's get your program going. But God has his own timing. It also shows the clarity of God's word. God's vision is to be plainly written so all could understand and respond. Also, it shows God's perfect timing, that though it may seem to tarry, God's plan will unfold precisely like he wanted it to, at his appointed time. Then the other message is the just shall live by faith, and that was a world-changing verse, and it truly changed the world. And another thing is that divine justice is sure, that God will ultimately deal with the wicked. He will ultimately deal with injustice. And a lot of times we don't see that now, but he will deal with it. He will deal with all the bad that's happening. And he will reward those that are doing good after we're saved. Not that doing good saves you, but doing good pleases God. And so he will reward that, things that are done through Christ. And it also talks about God's ultimate triumph. Despite the temporary rise of evil, God's glory will ultimately fill the earth. His kingdom will come. His will be done. And that's all I have. I should have did chapter 3 also, or chapter 1, but anyway, I thought it was going to be too long, So, but anyway, let's pray.